Jupiter Broadcasting presents this program in stereo.
This episode of the Linux Action Show is brought to you by FreshBooks.com and by GoDaddy.com. Use our promo code Linux and save 10%.
This week on the Linux Action Show, we chat with the head honcho of Real Software and find out why they are compelled to ship on Linux. Then we cover the launch of Gnome 3.0 and the new action tablet you've been jonesing for. Plus so much more. All this week on the Linux Action Show. And welcome to Season 16, Episode 4 of the Linux Action Show. My name is, of course, Brian. That guy's Chris.
Hey there, Brian. Check out this awesome Runs of Linux this week.
Ready for it.
Partimus. What? Yeah, Partimus.
Yep.
They are a non-profit organization that is providing open source computer and support services to school districts in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he hooked me up on Twitter and he said, hey, if you're looking for a Runs Linux this week, which I often am, check out my business. Their whole thing is they go in there and they just work on taking old computers that, schools kind of have to reuse for budget purposes.
They got a whole ton of underpowered machines. Every school does.
These guys can also bring in some hardware and sort of reinvest in them, get them running Linux, get them running open source software, and then they provide the support.
Dude, that's rocking.
So that's really cool. Maybe if you're in the California area, you might want to talk to those guys. I don't know.
Why not?
Put a link in the show notes for that. But I thought that was particularly cool.
That's a great way to go because, man, I tell you, most of the schools just do not need modern hardware. I mean, come on. We all like having the fastest. I mean, of course, everybody wants a Core i7 with blah, 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 blah. But really, come on. A middle-of-the-road older Pentium is going to allow you to browse the web, word process, do some graphic design work, everything you want to do.
I suppose,
so why not?
Unless you're like in a CAD lab or a video editing class.
Dude, well, even in a CAD lab, I mean, you can run, old AutoCAD and whatnot, and get all the features and all the skills you need on like 15-year-old hardware.
I've done work on and off for our local school district here, and some of the systems they have are 10 years old. I mean, it's painful, but if you're just doing it for like library card lookup and stuff like that, it does work.
Yeah.
And, we did tests, and we loaded Ubuntu on there, and they ran, it's funny, they ran great. Once you loaded these old 10-year-old machines with any Linux distro. We started with Debian, but then we got the Edge Ubuntu.
It doesn't even matter. You can find the slowest Linux distro. You could load up slow Ubuntu.
Well, yeah.
Slow Ubuntu.
But the Edge Ubuntu,
and it's still going to run
Edge
great.
Ubuntu was kind of neat. This whole
I'm not saying Ubuntu slow. I'm just saying there should be an Ubuntu distribution targeted at being slow. Slubuntu.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So, you throw those on there. Those things ran great except for Flash. As soon as you ran Flash on those old Linux boxes,
they get a little pokey.
Yeah, especially on Firefox 3.8.3 and anyway.
That's fine.
Hey, so let's talk about something that's really cool coming up now. We've talked about it a bit, but just a quick update. Just a reminder: one of the very few live events the Linux Action Show does is Linux Fest Northwest in Bellingham, Washington, April 30th and May 1st.
Awesome.
Coming up in just a couple of weeks.
And we're there in a huge, huge way. Any of you guys watching the show, you already know this. But just as a reminder, we're going to be there in the Linux Action Room. They have a huge event space, a good-sized event space with like booths. Usually every year there's people from, the OpenSUSE camps and the Ubuntu camps, and even the PCBSD guys show up usually with a nice big booth. And a lot of great local hardware vendors are there. It's a lot of fun. And then right next to that big booth, there's going to be a door that opens off right in the middle of it into another big giant room, and that is the Linux Action Room. We've got a ton of stuff that's going to be going on. We're going to be live streaming if the internet holds out as much as we can over the course of the weekend. Hopefully all weekend, but we'll see. We're going to be doing talks there. We're going to do a Linux Action Show live there. Hopefully we'll be able to take audience questions if we can. We're going to try and get a lot of this stuff set up.
It's all still in flux because it's a couple of weeks out, but one thing we want to try to do is Brian and I are gonna both do a couple of presentations there, and we're gonna see if we can't record that. Maybe we can release that as part of a future Linux Action Show or something like that.
It should be a lot of fun, and we're trying to see if we can get some of the other really cool sessions that are going to be going on at Linux Fest, because there's always a lot of interesting stuff presented by the community into that room, so we can record it or stream it. So you guys who maybe live in, let's say, Zimbabwe, most of you probably live in Zimbabwe, so that way you can watch it and it'll be fantastic.
Why not?
But if you do live in the Pacific Northwest, get up to Bellingham.
Brian,
it's going to be awesome.
Brian, I would love to see people there, and of course, we'll be sharing more information about that. There's also a Jupiter Colony thread where people are starting to organize in. I'll link that in the show notes as well.
Beauty.
Hey, I'm really, really excited. Okay, so we have a great Android pick coming up, and
nothing else.
All right, nothing else. Nothing else. No, I won't say.
What's this?
This is really cool. We've got a new sponsor on the
Tell
Linux
me
Action
all about
Show.
this.
Hey, anytime somebody comes on the Linux Action Show, of course, if they want to talk about sponsorship, I have a couple of requirements. They have to be badass, and I mean that.
Okay.
So check out freshbooks.com. They're our new sponsor this week, and cool little fact about FreshBooks.
Ready.
Red Hat Enterprise Linux on the back end.
Okay.
Desktop CentOS.
No way.
Yeah, they're a Linux shop front and back.
That's cool.
Super cool. And FreshBooks is easy online invoicing. And I mean that. Both the B-Man and I have to do invoicing for...
way too much.
Right?
Yeah.
And I effing hate invoicing.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt.
What I consider invoicing to be is like a micro version of doing my effing taxes every time I do it.
Wow, you've used the word F several times there.
I hate it. But here's the thing.
How do you feel about invoicing?
I'm passionate about it because FreshBooks really actually makes it pretty great. It's easy online invoicing that actually makes you look professional. They've got nice looking invoice templates you can add your own logo on. You can send electronic bills to your clients and they can choose to pay electronically or they can still pay you traditionally. And if you've got an old school client, check this out, B-Man. Here's an example invoice that they send out. Now you put your logo on this bad mamma jamma. Look at that.
Oh, that does look nice.
No, it looks slick.
And that's way better than a little. I have a little open office spreadsheets I rock with.
Right. That's what.
and I try and emulate this sort of look. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this looks really nice.
Yeah, it is. It
looks good.
Yeah. And I've tried open office templates. I've tried Google Docs templates. I mean, I've tried everything. The great thing is FreshBooks does it and they do it right. They've got a fully, it's all online too. So that means like when I'm reloading my distros, like last night, I just took a stab at loading Gnome 3 on my Natty install.
Yeah.
I just took a stab at it. Well, for all I know, that could totally hose my system. And, the nice thing about having this all on the web is that I just log in and all my stuff's there. I can reload my distro and I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff.
Oh, that is pretty rad.
I like that. So
I gotta be honest.
It's pretty cool.
I was this close to making fun of us for having someone
pretty neat.
Who did invoicing as a sponsor, but now you convinced me that's actually cool.
I think we probably have a lot of small businesses or freelancers out in the audience that could use something like this. But right before I wrap up, I want to just splash it with a little bit of extra incentive.
Oh.
You ready for this?
Ready.
When you go over to freshbooks.com, you can sign up for a free account because you don't have to, starting for free. You can
I love free.
You can invoice a few clients for free. It's great. Yep. But when you sign up, they have a little box that says, "How did you hear about us?" Put Linux in there. You'll get signed up for a free birthday cake giveaway drawing. And they're giving away a free cake to a member of our audience for every week in April. Doesn't even have to be your birthday. Free effing cake.
Can I ask you a question?
I'm serious.
You're joking, right?
A free cake,
They're giving away cake?
And if you get one of those cakes, because they're going to give away...
When you were saying this, the chat room was saying the word free cake, cake, over and over again.
Yeah.
I thought they were joking.
No, it's free cake.
I was about to laugh because I'm like, the chat room says cake.
You put Linux in there for the How'd You Hear About Us, and they will enter you into a drawing for a free cake giveaway for every week in April.
They're going to give you cake.
And I want a picture of it. We'll show it in the show. That's awesome.
They're going to give you cake.
So check out freshbooks.com, sign up for a free account, put in the little phrase Linux when you ask. Isn't that cool? And thanks to FreshBooks for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. How awesome is it to have a Linux running company sponsor the Linux Action Show? Love that. Right? How
do you top cake?
Well, pie.
I was just thinking. I'm like, well, we got to tell GoDaddy to step it up. Like, GoDaddy should give away a year's supply of hot dogs or something.
GoDaddy could give me a phone call to Danica, and I'd be happy.
A phone call to Danica.
Let's get Danica on the show.
Danica calls you for 5 minutes.
That'd be a great giveaway.
That's fantastic.
All right, I got an Android pick for you.
All right, lay it on me.
This one is a fun game, and I really like the developer of this too. I sent him an email just saying him great job. It's called Pew Pew. Mm-hmm. Pew Pew.
Good name.
And it's a fun little shooter that's sort of like
Robotron.
It's Robotron. It's what's the
Gravity Wars.
Geometry Wars.
Geometry Wars.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
It's those for your Android phone. And the guy even made the soundtrack available for it to download. I got to play it.
It sounds nice, too.
Now, you played it for a few minutes, but
That's nice.
you were
Yeah.
a little judgy, I thought, you know.
Of course I'm judgy.
I mean, I know you're a...
Hey, Chris, what's my name?
Check out the soundtrack.
That's a pretty good soundtrack.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
It's nice. It's nice.
So you're sitting here rocking out while you're playing Pew Pew.
Yeah, no, that's great.
All right, okay. Well, anyway.
It looks cool. It's nice and retro looking, so I
and-
like
and
that.
plus, dude, free. A free little shooter.
I do like
a free
free.
little shooter to
Free
kill
is
time
nice,
while you're
yeah.
on your phone. It's also available for the iPhone, and they have an iPad version too. If you have an iPad,
Double whatever.
I wonder if we're going to see a honeycomb version soon.
Well, I would hope so.
Now that's my Android pick, Brian.
Okay, so here's the thing. We've been doing the Android picks for a while.
Yeah.
I don't have them.
No, you don't.
I develop Android software, but I always use the emulators or like use like the loaner programs from the various carriers to test my stuff out on physical hardware. But I don't actually have an Android phone. I've got my Mamo phone here, and
Yeah.
I love my Mamo phone, and I don't want to give it up for an Android phone.
Sure.
So I don't care about Android
know,
picks. You
I
keep
know.
saying all these Android apps, and I'm looking at them, and some of them are cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, those are cool apps.
Sure.
But I don't care because I'm not going to run them.
No.
You know what I do run, though?
What?
Desktop freaking Linux.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
here's what we're doing. From
All
now
right,
on,
from
going
now
forward,
on?
we've got an Android app pick and a Linux app
Yeah.
pick. Linux, because it's a Linux action
That's
show.
right.
And this is Linux
I like it.
desktop
You know,
software.
the thing about it, too, is there's a lot of great apps out there that I don't even think about because we just use them every single day. See, the Android picks are sort of an easy one because you get a new app,
Yeah.
it's fresh on your mind,
Yeah.
it's easy to share.
Yeah.
But the desktop stuff, some of the stuff, might have been using it for years.
Sure, but here's the focus here. This isn't necessarily new software that just came out. What we're going
Right.
to focus on is the best. So here's the
that.
thing.
I like that a
Every
lot.
week, I am going to pick the best
Lay
of
it up.
something.
All right, give
the
me- come on.
best tool, the best browser,
dude, you were
the
setting the
best
bar.
tools, the best something.
This bar
And
is too high, man.
And here's the deal.
too high.
Here's the deal.
All right.
After so many weeks, so let's say 10 weeks down the line.
Let's say one.
Let's say 10 weeks down the line. You'll have then, at that point, 10 the best apps.
At least
the
one.
best. The
right,
best.
okay, you're
And
pulling
you
this
could pull
bar.
them all together
Hold on.
and make the best collection of
I gotta go
apps.
touch the bar, Brian.
It's
all
way
right
high.
there.
All right.
There's the bar.
Our first pick, we decided we'll start small. We're going to start with a small type of utility that everyone
Whoa,
needs occasionally.
They got a nice website, I'll tell you that.
A screenshot tool. We're going to go with Shutter.
Look at this
Shutter
fancy
is,
website.
without a doubt, the best way to take screenshots under Linux.
No kidding.
By a light year.
Whoa.
So not only does it allow you to take
Bold,
basic
sir.
screenshots, it allows you to take screenshots of specific areas,
And
it allows
annotate
you
them.
to annotate those
That's
areas,
money, that's
to
money.
uploads and submit those screenshots. It is awesome. It is stellar. There's instructions on the site for how to set it up as your default screenshot tool.
Oh, this is great.
You can get it at shutter-project.org. It is freaking tastic.
This is slick. I like this, dude.
It is fantastic. Now, a lot of you may be saying, well, why not use the built-in Gnome screenshot tool?
'Cause it's not as fancy
Why
as
not
this?
go that route? Because it's not as cool. This is better.
This is way better.
And there's nothing wrong with taking screenshot with Gnome screenshot. It works.
I did it last night.
And there are other good screenshot tools as well, but none of them stack
Now
up to
this
the
one
Shutter
looks like
project.
the boss, man. This is
it.
This is the boss of screenshot tools. I'll give you that. And I like their site. They look like they really got it together.
Yeah, no, this is really solid. Download it, install it, try it before you judge it. It's awesome.
Shutter-project.org.
.org.
There you
Best
have it.
way to take screenshots and do a little screencasting on Linux. Rockin'.
Boom. All right, B-Man. Let's do the news.
What's new in the news this week?
All right, Brian. The top story on the news docket for this week. Gnome 3.0 is released.
Not a big deal.
Oh, come on now. Now, first of all, Gnome 3.0 has definitely at least solidly been in the works since 2008,
This has
dude.
been so long in coming, man.
Yeah, it almost feels like a little Duke Nukem forever.
And before 2008, people were like, when do we get the 3.0 GNOME? And we talked
Right.
about it, like, I swear,
Yeah.
within the first 10 episodes of the Linux Action Show, which was 100 and whatever episodes
12 years ago. Yeah, 112.
Yeah, I believe it was 1804 when we first mentioned the idea of GNOME 3.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's been a long time.
Back then, they were still debating if they wanted to break the API or if they wanted to go.
Yeah, do they want to go with API compatibility
Right,
still?
we were
or
still,
what?
yeah, but that was...
It's
yeah.
rough, yeah.
So Gnome 3.0 is out. It's got the whole new Gnome Shell interface, which
does.
is completely different. And
it throws you for a loop. It does. We'll be doing a full rundown of this.
Yeah,
sucker.
I think I want to wait because this is such a big topic now. I threw this on my laptop last night.
Yeah,
it is still really rough. I have a link in the show notes, but I got the there's a PPA you can get for Natty for Ubuntu Natty.
I'm running it on OpenSUSE myself, just because I've only got one machine dedicated to GNOME 3 right now, and it's running well, but it's a huge thing. I've been running it mostly full time this week, and I definitely have a lot to say on the topic, but I'm not ready for it.
Yeah, I'm not ready for it either.
It's too big.
I'm going to save it. It's interesting though. I'll say this. It's interesting to use Unity in its current state for a few weeks and then switch over to GNOME 3.
It's weird, isn't it?
I honestly, there's aspects of GNOME 3. GNOME 3 feels like there was about a year, and I think this is true, about a year of polish in certain areas. So far in my early impressions, the way the system responds to my clicks and the way things appear and the way it seems to the new notification system is completely beautiful. It is so fantastically elegant the way like the notifications for network changes come up. I mean, these guys are onto something. And I have been extremely skeptical internally. I haven't even been voicing all my skepticism about GNOME 3, and I feel a lot better now. But it feels real early, but I want to use it more before we really talk about it on the show. I want to give it a completely fair shake. So we're watching that, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So leave us a comment on it.
I'm not ready. We got to wait and talk about it because I've got GNOME 3 shell over here, and I've got Unity over here at home, and I'm using both, and it's
a little weird.
It messes with your head, is what it does.
And if you're out there and you're struggling, you're like, boy, I'm just not looking forward to either one of these desktops, and you're not a KDE person. I got also a link in here for the Ubuntu GNOME Remix. You knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would probably just start looking seriously maybe at OpenSUSE or Fedora or Mandriva or another distro like Arch. But if you want to stick in the Ubuntu camp and you want to try out a GNOME Remix spin, this is going to be like the latest. Hopefully, if this works out, this guy's going to have the latest GNOME spin on Ubuntu.
My general hope is when we do our full review, I'm going to review it as Arch and OpenSUSE because I figure Arch is where you go for cutting edge. You know what I mean? Arch is where you go when you want the latest packages.
Yeah, when you want that repo that they
So that way I'm going to get the latest stuff, and OpenSUSE does a good job of really focusing on GNOME 3 for a GNOME 3 release, so I'm going to go both.
I hear you, man. I am definitely trying to keep my options open.
Yes.
I want to be a flexible dude.
Yes.
All right, next story on the news docket is one that struck my fancy because it's multi-layered. First of all, it's about our old buddies over at Asus, the pioneers of the Linux-based netbook who then crapped on our face later with the It Runs Better campaign. But they're back now with a honeycomb tablet.
Holy moly, it looks fancy.
It does look fancy, and here's the interesting thing. Its honeycomb source code is available for download over on their website right now. You can go download.
You can go grab it.
You can go download their OS, and it's available for download. But check this thing out. I have not been following this very much. It's the Triple E-Pad Transformer TF101, and it comes with an optional keyboard dock. Now that kind of maybe sounds like a little Atrix to you, possibly. But this thing actually looks super slick.
It looks great. It looks fantastic. Basically, it looks like a netbook tablet. It's a lot like the TouchBook. It's like the always innovating TouchBook is a lot what this reminds me of, except it's made by a bigger manufacturer and it's running Android.
And when you have it in the dock, it looks like a full-fledged laptop that because
it really is
with exceptional build quality.
Because that's what it is. It's a full-on. Basically, it's a netbook.
Yeah.
It's a full netbook.
Running
Honeycomb, which honestly is fine. I mean, Honeycomb's powerful enough that at this point to be a laptop.
Well, here's what's interesting too, dude. Check this out. So they're saying here's the specs, and if these don't make your mouth water, I don't know what would. It's going to run in the latest Honeycomb dual-core NVIDIA Tegra 2 processor, 1 gig of RAM, 1280 by 800 IPS display. That's the really good different angles.
Yeah.
You can really see it from all the different angles. It's either going to have a 16 gig or a 32 gig variation. And then, of course, we don't know how much the keyboard dock's going to be yet. The tablet itself is expected to get 8 hours of battery.
Well, the keyboard dock we're hearing is $125.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you put that tablet in the keyboard dock, your battery goes from 8 hours to 16 hours.
Yep.
Rumored prices
Awesome.
are going to be somewhere around $500 US for 16 gigs. Boy, this thing looks slick.
I gotta be honest. This is the first device that makes me crave Android.
And I like
because up until now, I mean, like the Zoom's powerful, right?
Yeah.
But it just didn't do it for me. This thing.
Check this out. The keyboard dock has a USB port on it, so you can hook up devices to it and stuff.
Stick your camera in there.
I'm really thinking this might be the tablet I go for.
This would be a great little machine. Plus, you got the nice keyboard going on. Honestly, I like Asus. Their EEE line is great.
And
I
they've
still
been
love my old
building stuff
EEE
really
netbooks.
well. Look at the quality on that.
It looks gorgeous.
It looks like possibly a single mouse button, though. Of course, how do you even use a trackpad in Honeycomb?
I have no idea.
I thought that's what Chrome OS was for.
Google.
Oh, speaking of that, we had a lot of people mention the whole Honeycomb source code.
So here's the
stuff.
thing. So I tried to contact Google. I sent quite a few emails to various email addresses. I never heard anything back.
Here's what I did.
I gave him a full 2 weeks. Never got a peep. I asked around on forums. I asked around on mailing lists.
Yep.
I asked all over the place. I'm like, guys, does anyone know where I can get this? Where do I even request this? Do you have any ideas? Nobody knew. I did my best to try every avenue I could find. As far as I can tell, Google makes no way to get this code directly from them.
So I found a discussion forum where there was somebody who seemed a little, honestly, I think you have to take it with a grain of salt. They might have been a little butthurt. But what they said was that it seems that essentially you have to have a lot of what Google considers interesting for them to pay attention to you in regards to Honeycomb right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of the gist I got. But then, of course, Asus comes along and boom.
I like that.
You can go grab the source code to Honeycomb right now, at least as far as it runs on their device.
All right, B-Man.
That's pretty cool.
Let's talk about this last story in the news doc before we wrap up, because it's just a quick follow-up story on just a brief disclaimer. Now, it seems accurate, but this is also, the guy that wrote the blog post is the same gentleman who wrote the, sort of stirred up a lot of fear about Android infringing on Linux patents.
Yeah.
So some people don't trust what he says, but I've read it, and it seems pretty accurate. He's looking back now at the Novell patent sell-off as part of their deal with Attachment. And you remember there was that umbrella corporation that represented Oracle, Apple, Microsoft, and EMC.
Yeah.
And they were buying up tons and tons and tons of Novell's old patents.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that the regulators have stepped in, according to this blog post that he's done the analysis here. And here's the interesting thing. That sale of the patents looks like it's going to go forward probably on the 12th, so Tuesday, I think that is. And the interesting part about it, though, is Microsoft will be required to sell its entire 25% allocation immediately to Attachmate, the guys that got Novell. So Microsoft isn't going to hold on to those patents. The other thing is that the regulators have promised that EMC's allocation won't include any of the 31 previously identified EMC patents that are related to virtualization. EMC owns VMware. They're starting to be considered having potentially a rather large monopoly hold on that enterprise virtualization. So the regulators said, all right, EMC, you're not getting those patents. Microsoft, you have to sell off your patents. But Oracle and Apple, you can keep yours. Kind of interesting.
It is kind of interesting.
So that's just a follow-up on that whole Novell sale deal. Is it looks like Microsoft will temporarily own the patents, but not indefinitely. Yeah. So that all is probably.
I need to gestate on that one a little bit.
I think probably that's a good thing as far as the impact on Linux, because it seems like what the people are conjecturing is a lot of the patents that EMC and Microsoft were both interested in is Novell has some really sophisticated network storage backend technology that they have patents for.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is probably in a lot of the Linux-based SANs now.
Right.
And so I think it's probably a good thing considering that Microsoft did not get their hands on those. Who knows what would have happened, but I think it's probably a good thing.
I think it's probably a good thing. Considering Microsoft did have the Windows Home server and things like that. They are interested in those sorts of markets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, B-Man. All right, now before we jump over to our interview, I want to give a quick mention to the buddies over at GoDaddy.com.
No.
Yep.
GoDaddy?
We got the GoDaddy. It's our second and last but not least sponsor of this week, because we loves the GoDads.com. In fact, the B-Man and I here were working on a project this week. And it's funny, when you have a client, they come to you and they have everything except for no place to store it, no bandwidth for it, and nowhere to host like the back-end scripts and stuff like that.
Just not prepared in any way. So we're like, you know what? Luckily, GoDaddy, boom, GoDaddy server up and running, super cheap, paid almost nothing for it. Basically, we went outside, we scrounged around in the yard, found as many nickels as we could, boom, GoDaddy server up and running.
Seriously.
Through our CGI scripts and our PHP, boom, all up on the server, loaded up a MySQL, boom, took us like no time at all.
Yeah.
Client was ready to go.
Rocking.
We can use our code Linux to save 10%. 10, and that's off of whatever you want.
Sure.
And then you can type in Linux 2.0. That's for hosting. 20%. That's 20% off. So you go outside, you find, let's say, 10 nickels. You come inside and you're like, I'm going to use these 10 nickels to pay for hosting.
Yeah.
You don't have to because you typed in Linux 2.0. You're paying 8 nickels.
Yeah, so you got extra nickels.
2 free nickels.
Go get yourself an ice cream sandwich.
From GoDaddy.com.
There you have it. Thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring this episode of the Linux Action Show.
It's so good, in fact, I am not upset at them for not providing cake.
Oh, well, they did provide Danica, so...
Oh.
That, I do appreciate that Danica does seem to make it on the front page on Sundays. That's not too bad.
You notice that's happening more and more?
Yeah, I have noticed that.
Yeah.
Thank you, GoDaddy.
Somebody at GoDaddy is watching.
Yeah. All right, Brian. Well, that's all the news for this week.
So was it 2 weeks ago we had on the CEO from RunRev?
Yeah, Kevin.
Kevin, the guys that make live code.
Yeah.
And we thought, we were already talking about development tools on Linux. Now, there's a lot of development tools out there that everyone knows about.
Sure.
And we're not really going to talk about like using Vi or Emacs and using GCC.
Yeah.
We're talking about the high level tools here to kind of be a little bit more approachable for the layman and for kind of the hobbyist developers.
Or really, if you're doing a job and you need to produce a tool or a product for them in a pretty quickly, efficiently manner.
More rapid application development sort of tools. So we're kind of looking at a lot of those. So we thought, since we had the guy that did that made live code on, let's bring on the guy that runs the company that makes Real Studio. So joining us today, we have Jeff Perlman, CEO of Real Software. Say hello to the entire internet, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
Hello, entire internet.
There you go.
So let's just kind of dive into it. So what is Real Studio from your point of view?
Real Studio is you said RAD. It's a rapid application development tool that is cross-platform, Mac, Windows, and Linux, and the web now as well. So the idea of Real Studio is to make it very approachable, but a lot of products focus on ease of use or power. Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a cop-out to feel like you have to choose one or the other. I think it's, if you're going to put the effort out, you can make a product that's easy to use and powerful. And so we have a range of users. But the big thing with Real Studio is that, because we abstract you from a lot of the OS level details, you can focus on what makes your product unique. And by product, I mean, it could be a commercial product. It could be an in-house utility. It could be something you're building for yourself and for your friends. It could be an open source project. Whatever it is, the point is to focus on what makes it unique rather than all of the nitty-gritty minutia.
Mm-hmm. So now, obviously, Real Studio is available for Linux.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I kind of wanted to touch on that's a little different than some of the tools out there is that now Real Studio itself actually produces machine code, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we compile to x86 machine code.
Now, is it that way on all platforms, Mac, Windows, Linux? There's no like interpreter or run for that sort of thing?
There's actually never been an interpreter in Real Studio at all. It's always been compiled to machine code.
And the neat thing is, for people that aren't familiar, is you're talking about really here. It's a checkbox option, and you build for the different platforms. I mean, that's
right. I mean,
and you build the native code.
That's right. You don't have to think about, I need to build for Linux, or I need to build for Windows or Mac or the web. You're just checking a checkbox, and you've got a native executable. And we use native widgets on each platform as well. So, for example, on Linux, we use Gnome or GTK.
Right.
GTK. So, and that makes a big difference.
That makes a huge difference. Yeah. That gives you a little bit of more street cred. I mean, it's like with like the mono and mono develop guys. You can make a great, say, mono and .NET kind of WinForms application, but if you use the WinForms UI, you're going to get these kind of Windows
feel like it should
2000 looking.
It feels like it doesn't belong.
Controls.
It feels like, as the user, it feels cheap. It doesn't feel like the experience was.
You can spot a non-native application a mile away.
Yeah. That's the issue.
So,
I think that was a big issue with adoption for Java apps, is people didn't spend the time to make their controls look native, and that was I think a lot of people had issues with that. And
I'll tell you, my wife volunteers at the elementary school where our kids go, and she helps with the yearbook, among other things. And the yearbook is done with an application, a desktop application that's written in Java. And on the Mac, they really tried to, at least make the controls look like Aqua. Mac native controls. But the problem is they're not native controls. And so it ends up looking like crap.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It almost would have been better if they didn't even try to make it look, because then you just say, okay, it doesn't have a native interface. When they try to make it look native and it's not,
Right.
It's a
then
lipstick on a pig sort of a thing. Yeah.
Chris said it perfectly. It looks cheap.
Yeah, it does look a little
Exactly
cheap.
right.
It really does. So just out of curiosity, why choose going the GTK route? Why not one of the other widgets or tool sets that are available on the Linux side? Why go GTK instead of say Qt or something?
Okay, so well, first of all, GTK is sort of the first desktop, right, for Linux. I mean, it's sort of the one that's been around the longest, I believe. But we also ran into a problem with KDE. KDE is, well, it's not so much KDE as it is Qt, or as I found out, it's actually pronounced cute.
Yes.
We never say cute. We just say we say things how you want to say them. You're allowed to fully mispronounce anything you want on this show. And people will assume you're doing it to make us happy.
We do it constantly. Yeah.
I prefer Qt to cute, but
absolutely.
Anyway, so Qt. So when we were looking at going to Linux, cross-compiling to Linux, we looked at the possibility of building our platform layer on top of Qt.
Sure.
Because we thought, hey, that'd be a lot easier, and they've already done some of the groundwork for us.
Absolutely.
But it turns out that there was a stipulation in their license agreement that said that you basically couldn't build a development tool with Qt unless it was open source, and we're not open source. So it was interesting because I'm drawing a blank on the name, but the Delphi version, the version of Delphi for Linux, which wasn't called Delphi.
Kylix?
Kylix. That was it. Kylix. Yeah. So Kylix was built on Qt. So I was a little confused about that. So I contacted. They were bought by Nokia.
Borland. Yeah.
Nokia.
Trolltech.
Trolltech. I contacted Trolltech and I said, it looks like the license agreement says that we couldn't use your product, but I noticed that Kylix is built on that, and it's not open source. Yeah. So how's that all work? Well, it turned out that the CEO of Borland, which owns Delphi, was on the board of Trolltech.
Well, that's cheating.
Well, see, we
they had a shortcut deal.
So you realize then that was your first mistake. You should have then been on the board of Trolltech.
Apparently, I should have.
That would have fixed everything.
Yeah, but
Jeff,
I wasn't.
Can I ask you a question? You touched on it for a sec. You mentioned Real Studio and the associated products around that are not open source. And I think sometimes that's a barrier entry for the developers. Now, it doesn't preclude them from releasing their end product as open source, but what's your take on that with a closed development environment on an open desktop? Is that a challenge you guys struggle with internally, and what's kind of your resolution on that?
No, not really. I mean, just because we're closed source doesn't mean that people that use our product have to be closed source. I mean, that's really true on any development. For example, Windows is a closed source OS. Mac OS 10 is a hybrid, right? And in fact, we actually provide free licenses to Linux users that are doing open source projects. So we support open source.
That.
Yeah.
Let's make a call out to that real quick. So if you do have an open source project and you want to use Real Studio, so the thing is you basically go to their website, they contact you, and you can provide them with basically a license for Real Studio Standard Edition is pretty much what it is?
Yeah. Okay. Personal edition. Yeah.
Personal edition for Linux.
Yeah, and if it's an open source project, we provide those licenses for free. So I think that open source is, when any big movement comes along, everyone wants to believe, or there's always a large group of people that want to believe that is the answer to everything. And it's not even a movement. It could be a technology. It could be anything. And often it turns out, most of the time it turns out that that's not really true. There's a place for closed source. There's a place for open source. And it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. What's the goal of the project? What your personal values are. We don't want to put our values on those of our users.
Sure.
So,
right.
If we were open source, then they would have to be open source, right? If it was it was GPL anyway.
Right.
So our attitude is you can do whatever you want. Closed source, open source, it doesn't really matter to us.
Huh. Well, there you have.
Okay.
Now, do you want to talk a little bit about the web edition? Because that's what I'm curious about.
I have a couple other questions for you, but first I want to dive into the web edition. So you guys, this is a new thing. You guys have come out with this last year. So basically, it's the ability to build in Real Studio using basically, for the most part, the same framework with some changes to the UI, and you can build a standalone CGI or fast CGI, kind of with a little accompanying Perl script that kicks it off.
I was impressed quite a bit.
And it's fully standalone, and the applications are kind of designed to act as if they're desktop applications. So you kind of have, the full Ajax-y Web 2.0-ish experience without having to write any of the Ajax code.
That's right.
Now, the one thing I thought was very, very cool was it builds down to machine code for the CGI for all three platforms. Like
does it produce 3 CG? How does
you
that?
can basically.
It's just like a desktop app. You can say, I want a version for Linux, Windows, Mac. It's up to you. What's the web server going to be?
Oh,
right.
okay.
So you can
if the
actually
web server's
build
Windows.
Yeah, you can
go
build
ahead.
a CGI that acts as your full application. Say you were building like a content management tool or a blog or whatever you wanted to build, and you had it on Linux. You build a Linux version. You're like, you know what? I'm going to move over to a Windows server now, which of course that's the wrong direction to
You're
go.
probably going from Windows to
Right.
Linux.
But you can start wherever you want, move over, and you just check the other checkbox, build it, and away you go.
I gotcha.
So it's like
And that's a critical issue because, for example, Perl does not work very well on Windows.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So there's certain technology, and Windows is actually usually the odd man out, ironically, right? Whereas things that work on Linux generally will work on Mac OS 10, for example, and vice versa. But I want to correct you guys on one thing, just to make it
We
absolutely
love
clear.
corrections.
Okay, the Perl script is the CGI. Your app is just an app. It's a console app.
Okay.
So the Perl CGI talks to your app, right?
That makes sense.
Got
It acts as the gateway. Yeah.
Got it. So
right.
basically, the app is just like a simple little command line application.
Yeah, it's a command line app, and the connection comes through Apache, and then to the Perl script, and then to the application, and then
How's the support for building web apps? Are you stuck to only like desktop browsers, or can you do stuff for like mobile devices?
Oh no! If it's we support mobile Safari, we support Chrome on mobile. So yeah, you can build mobile as well. Now we don't currently have widgets that are specific for mobile. However, we use native widgets wherever we can, just like we do on the desktop. So the result of that, for example, is that if you have an iPhone and you click on a pop-up menu, mobile Safari knows that that's a pop-up menu and treats it accordingly. Right.
Very
Same with
nice.
the text fields and all that. So yeah, so it's native wherever we can. The difference with the web is that the number of native controls that a web browser supports is just a handful. Radio button, checkbox, push button,
Sure.
Text field, pop-up menu. That's about it. So the rest of them, things like list boxes, segmented controls, the plethora of other controls that are out there, we have to create ourselves. But
Now, one thing, it's really kind of interesting how you guys have tackled a lot of these issues. So one of the big problems with building, interesting websites and, especially really dynamic ones is getting the styles quite right. And, doing a lot of work in CSS is enough to make you want to, drill a drill through the front of your forehead. Now, Chris, there's that middle screenshot on the left. Bring that one
This
up
guy?
there. Yeah, that guy up here. What you guys have done is, and I thought this was fantastically done. Within the individual project, you can create what basically is like a style class or a style object, and you have a visual editor for editing all the various things you'd edit normally in CSS visually, and you can apply them to any window, any form, any specific control, and you can almost kind of nest them. Like you can have a style for the form and then a style for each individual control differently, or you can have them inherit. It's very interestingly done, and I kind of I hate to say that people should steal your ideas, but I kind of wish all the other web tools would do something kind of like that.
Yeah,
know what you
it's
mean.
interesting. You touched on it, but the styles are like classes, so they can inherit from each other. So you can have a style that's sort of your main style, and then define more specifics in sub-styles, essentially.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then assign them, however you want. And yeah, it is all visual, which is which is really nice. I mean, what we're trying to do with the web is make it so that the experience of building a desktop or building a web application is approximately the same as building a desktop application. So it's visual drag and drop, minimal amount of coding. Your code is really focused on what makes your app unique. And we handle the session management. We handle state. I mean, that's a big thing. If you're writing an application in say, PHP, you have to manage the state of the application. If the user goes from one page to another and comes back and you want to restore the state, that's up to you to code that.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
We handle all of that for you. You don't have to do any state management at all. And another advantage to the way our web edition evolved is that because we build native applications, because we compile down to native machine code, you've got a web application that's extraordinarily secure. A friend of mine is a internet security expert.
That's actually that's a great point, because if you write a PHP app, you're going to have to store, say, the login credentials to, say, your MySQL database somewhere, and it's probably going to be stored in just a pure little PHP configuration file. And while you can do your best to obfuscate that and make it hard to get at, it still exists there. But if you compile it into the native binary, well, they gotta basically decompile your entire application somehow in order to possibly get at that info.
Right. A friend of mine is an internet security expert, and he said that the only way to secure a web server is to unplug it. He says if a hacker wants to get onto a server, they will get onto the server. There's no question. So then it comes down to what's going to happen once they get on the server. Well, with traditional tools, once they get onto the server, they've got access to all of your source code.
Right.
And they can modify that source code in ways you might not notice, right? And sometimes they do it in ways you really notice, right? They're intending to do that, but other times they can do it in very, very subtle ways.
Is that essentially what we just saw with the Liza Moon attacks? It was a code injection. It was one part SQL injection, another part cross-site cross-scripting, where they injected a URL into somebody's code.
Basic idea.
Right. So in our case, if they get onto the server and they go and find your application, what they're staring at is machine code. Right. So they better know assembler. And the thing about that is how many programmers know assembler?
Right.
Dude, I haven't touched assembly of any kind in at least a decade, and my life is so much better for it.
Right, exactly.
You're gonna hurt somebody's feeling in the audience.
Probably. I know at least a couple of guys. Yeah.
So that makes the apps very secure. So there's that aspect of it, and then the other aspect is, what's popular these days is software as a service, right? Why is that popular? Well, it's popular because I believe that software as a service came about because there was no other choice. How else were you going to protect your intellectual property, right?
Right.
So what you do is instead of selling the customer an app that they would run on their own server, you provide it as a service where you run their data, you have their data on your server.
Right.
So you don't have to give them your intellectual property. Well, because we compiled the machine code, you can write an application in Real Studio and you can sell it just like you sell a desktop application with a serial number and all that, because you're not giving out your intellectual property.
Right.
You're not giving out your PHP files, your HTML, your JavaScript. Right?
That is kind of interesting. I know a couple of like web forum software do similar things where they sell like a CGI that you can use to run their web forum and stuff. So let's look at this, from kind of taking a little bit of a step back for a second. So one of the big barriers, besides the fact that Real Studio is closed source, a lot of people on the Linux side will look at that and say, oh, I like working with open source tools. Obviously, there's some distinct benefits to going with your tool over a lot of the other ones. But one thing a lot of people are going to look at is the language in particular. So technically, the language you are using is called Real Basic. And it has the word basic in it, which means people are invariably going to laugh at you, point at you, and give you a wedgie. Now, what do you say to people who mock you because you have the word basic in the name of your language?
Yeah,
that's a good question. I would say you haven't looked at our language.
Fair enough. So what is it? What is about the language? I mean, how does Real Basic as a language compare to Java, to C#, to Objective-C, to C++? How does it compare to the other languages that are out there?
Okay, so Real Basic as a language is much more similar to Java in terms of its capabilities, or C++, than it is to Basic. Okay.
Really? Okay. So I mean, we're talking like, multiple inheritance. We talking,
Well, no, we don't
properly
do
object oriented.
we don't do multiple inheritance like C++. We do interfaces like Java.
Nice. Good.
Right.
Because
So
multiple
we async-
inheritance makes me cranky. So that's fine.
Right.
That's good.
So we do
Brian's okay with that.
interfaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was almost a trick question for you. You were almost going to be like, oh, no, we do kind of multiple inheritance. And I was going to go, that stinks, and hang up on you. But you answered correctly.
But unlike Java, we compiled a machine code. So there's no bytecode interpreting or
I dig that.
There's a performance leg up there, I'm sure.
just-in-time compiling or any of that
Yeah.
that stuff. So it's a dot syntax. It's got inheritance. It's got interfaces. It's got delegates. It's got introspection, operator overloading. It's got all of the powerful features that you look for in a modern object-oriented language. The word basic was really to send the message that if you're coming from Visual Basic, the syntax is similar enough and some of the keywords are similar enough that you can make that move fairly easily. But if you're looking for, I look at it as the benefits of C++ compiling a machine code with all of the benefits of Java being a very powerful higher level object-oriented language without the downsides of either of those languages.
So it's like Java compiled the machine code without all the stinking squiggly brackets.
Right. That's another part of BASIC is that we do the format because it's an integrated environment, because you're not writing in just any old text editor. You don't have to worry about semicolons and curly braces and things like that, which for a lot of people, a lot of our customers don't necessarily come from a development background. They don't have a business card that says I'm a developer. So a lot of them become developers, right? They started out as not being developers, but they end up becoming developers without realizing it.
Right.
And that's what makes Real Studio approachable for the beginner, but also you don't run out of steam. There's a lot of products where it's really easy to use, and then when you try to do something sophisticated, you kind of run out of power.
Yeah.
And, that doesn't happen.
You run into
with our-
walls. I hate that. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously, we've kind of taken care of a lot of that. Now I want to get to really one of the nuts and bolts of this question here. Why make Real Studio for Linux? What's in it for Real Software?
Right.
Which I've not said this already, but people in the chat room got a little bit confused. Real Software and Real Networks are not the same thing.
No.
Jeff does not make Real Player, which I know many of you don't like. He makes totally different companies, guys.
Different companies.
We actually got a nasty letter from Real Networks when we first opened our doors from their legal department saying that we sounded too similar and that we had to change our name and our product name, and our lawyers sent them the legal equivalent of the middle finger, and we never heard from them again. So
that'll probably win you a few fans among our fan base. So why Linux? What do you guys get out of making a Linux version? Many people would look at it and say, you already make a version for Mac and for Windows. Why port it over and support it for an entirely new platform that many people would say is full of zealots who only want open source software?
Those people are wrong, sir.
And crazy hippies. What is it that's in it for you guys?
Right. So, we don't make a lot of money from Linux. Okay. I'll tell you that straight up. We don't sell a lot of licenses. We give away a lot of licenses. We don't sell a lot of licenses on Linux. But cross-platform, if you're going to be a cross-platform development tool, you can't ignore Linux. You can't. It's too big to ignore. Saying you're cross. It's funny because there's Windows products that say they're cross-platform, and what they mean is that they run on Windows 98, Windows 2000, right. Windows 7. That's what they mean by cross-platform.
They're cross Windows, yeah.
Yeah, right. So by us supporting Linux, it does a couple of things. First of all, it provides a great tool for Linux users, because I think that one of the issues Linux has, and I think that Canonical is doing a great job with Ubuntu in trying to counter this, is that Linux comes across as sort of the geeky, OS. And for a lot of people, that's what makes it attractive. But for other people, that's a turnoff. And I think that a lot of the development tools that are out there for Linux are for the geeky side of the crowd, and something more approachable is going to be interesting to a different audience than is being served by those. So for us to be cross-platform, it sends there's the Linux side of it, but then it sends the message to the rest of our users that, hey, whatever major OS you want to go to, you're going to be able to support it. It's like that's why we added the web. If you need to go to the web, great, and we support you on the web. All the knowledge that you've accumulated by using Real Studio over the years now applies to the web. We started on the Mac. We went to Windows, and the same thing. You didn't have to learn anything new. It just worked on Windows. Then we added Linux. Didn't have to learn anything new. It just works on Linux now, and now the web. So it really better supports the cross-platform message to support Linux.
Fair enough. Now, along those lines, there's been a lot of movement lately in the general Linux world, moving more towards, I wouldn't say fully embracing commercial software, but a great example is in Ubuntu, they have the Ubuntu Software Center, and that's they've been slowly ramping up. There aren't a ton of applications in there. I think it's at 10 or 11 applications, commercial software that people can buy within their store. What are your general thoughts on commercial software on Linux as a platform and kind of what's happening there? And as a follow-up to that, would you ever consider, from your company's standpoint, selling your software through some of those solutions that are appearing, such as the Ubuntu Software Center?
Okay, so what was the first part of that question? Sorry.
So do you have any general thoughts on Linux as a commercial software platform? Yeah.
Okay. So I'll say this. The interesting thing about Linux is if you say, well, where is Linux going? Well, that's a hard question to answer because Linux isn't really controlled by any one person, right? So it can go in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, it sure can.
But if Linux is going to be popular with the consumer is expecting to have lots of software options available, and some of those will be open source free options, right? But even those then have to be packaged for the consumer. Okay, the consumer isn't going to download and recompile from source code your open source project.
Right.
You've got to provide binaries. You need an easy installer. I think that's one of the things that Apple has done really well with their new Mac App Store, right? You click and it installs the app for you. We need that on Linux. So that's going to be really important. And so commercial software, I believe, is going to, they're going to be projects that aren't going to happen as an open source project. And when that's the case, then a commercial solution is a really good solution.
Yeah, and based on what you've seen so far, whether it be from your own particular experience with Real Studio and making sales on the Linux platform, would you say at this point that desktop Linux, let's say you target the top three distros, the SUSE and the Fedora and the Ubuntu, and you just target those three distros, would you say from your experience that you could recommend to someone that Linux is a viable target for at least your average commercial software venture, to say you can sell software on Linux?
Right.
You could actually make a go of it at this point, or do you feel like there's still somewhere to go?
I think it's early. Yeah, I think the Linux needs to become more popular among consumers before commercial applications before you'll have enough people buying software. Android is suffering from this, right? Because Android is the Linux of mobile phones, essentially, right? To a degree. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people that like Android like it because it's sort of the geeky side of mobile phones, right?
Yeah, sure.
Mobile developers will tell you that selling software on Android is extraordinarily difficult. Now that's interesting because Android has a lot of users. So
huge market base,
right? Yeah, but there's two problems. One, the commercial marketplace for Android software is really fragmented. There's Amazon sells some, and the carriers have their stores.
Right.
Whereas Apple with the iPhone, they have a single store, so everyone knows where to go to get software. Mm-hmm. Google has also recently found out the reason that Apple requires everything to be checked by their engineering team, right? Apple checks every application and approves it before it goes online. Android's suffering from a lot of malware and viruses and things like that. And so suddenly they're saying, well, now we're going to start approving apps. So, but going back to the original question about commercial software, Canonical, again, is doing a great job of making Linux approachable. They're making a operating system, or they're making a distro of Linux that is aimed at the consumer, and it's the most popular distro as a result. So I think that's why they have a store and things like that. But I think for commercial software, it's going to take some more time.
So would you consider putting Real Studio in something like the Ubuntu Software Center?
Yeah.
Is that at this point, do you think those solutions are viable enough for even?
Yeah, no, I would definitely do it. In fact, we've talked to Canonical, and I need to get back on the board with that, because it took them a while, and then then it took us a while, and so we need to get back into discussions with them about that. But I that's one of the things that will help Linux become popular among consumers. Is consumers need a very straightforward, simple way. They're not going to go to the local CompUSA or Best Buy or name your favorite computer retailer, and buy a packaged Linux application.
Seems like that's just going away more and more.
It's
anyways,
completely going away.
Yeah. So
on all platforms, not just on.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So that there needs to be a unified store, and I think at least for Ubuntu users, Canonical is providing that, and that's great. Yeah.
So now, I've got two other quick questions for you, but first I want to make mention you guys have gifted us with two licenses to give away here, and here's what we're gonna do. We have a copy of Real Studio Web Edition for Linux.
Okay.
How much is that normally, Jeff?
It's $5.99.
$5.99, so $599, and you've also gifted us with a copy of Enterprise Edition for Linux, which has the web edition built in, plus the ability to cross-compile for Windows, Linux, and Mac. Now, how much does that normally run?
That's normally $995.
So $1,000. All right, so we're going to give away one of each of these.
Cool.
So here's what we're going to do.
Okay.
If you're watching the show, you have 1 week. Go over, hop on the Twitters.
Okay.
If you don't have an account, just make one.
Yeah, why not?
And you need to tweet, nice and simple. You need to compliment us in some way and provide a link to jupiterbroadcasting.com. Compliment us however you want.
Yes, sir, yes.
Tell us how pretty we are. Mention that Brian's hair looks nice today.
Yeah, or Chris's hair. Come on, give Chris's hair some love.
Talk about Jeff and Real Software coming on the show. Whatever you want to talk about, provide a link to jupiterbroadcasting.com. It has to be a full, clickable HTTP link.
Could be Bitly, though, right?
And include the hashtag. So, hash tic-tac-toe.
So you got to have a URL
sign,
and a hashtag.
Jupiter. So hashtag lowercase Jupiter. If the hashtag's not in there, you don't get entered.
Harsh.
And next week, we will randomly choose from everyone who did it, and one of you will get Enterprise, and one of you will get Web Edition.
Very cool.
Thanks for throwing that over to our crew.
That's
honestly,
awesome.
that's pretty cool.
That's very fun. That'll be fun for us to give away next week.
Enterprise $1,000, guys.
That's awesome.
All you got to do is compliment.
So is there anything else we should touch on with
Yes,
Jeff?
I have one more question.
All right, let's do it.
This has nothing to do with Real Studio.
All right.
Clear your mind.
Okay.
Totally blank here, Jeff.
Gone.
GNOME 3, Unity, or KDE 4?
Oh.
I think that's a religious question.
Yeah,
that's like saying, Christianity,
it is
Muslim, Jewish, Hindu,
and
Buddhist.
it's one we've stepped our foot in a few times.
Several times.
Yeah. But I will say this. For me, because we just sort of grew up with GNOME,
soft
that's
spot.
where my loyalty lies.
Yeah, I have a soft spot for the
So you're
GNOME.
going GNOME, but so are you going GNOME 3 and the GNOME shell, classic GNOME, GNOME 2, or Unity with GNOME applications? What are you thinking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say GNOME 3.
Yeah, wow.
All right, there you have it. It's official.
It's still
Jeff
GNOME.
Perlman says GNOME 3.
He sounds a little unsure because he's like me. It's like, well, it's a little new still. I'm not positive.
Yeah.
No. I like being on the bleeding edge. Believe me.
I'm a little nervous myself just because I don't know exactly where it's going.
I'm a little nervous myself.
Yeah.
All right, but thanks again for coming on the show, Jeff. You guys do make an excellent product.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had again 2 weeks ago we had the Run Rev guys on the show. They make a great product too. I don't want to belittle anybody because honestly, you guys make entirely different products. They aren't even. They technically are development tools, but they really aren't the same kind of thing. They're a whole different deal. So I just want to say definitely worth checking out if you guys are into rapid application development, cross-platform development, worth looking at. Thanks again for coming on the show, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Again, Linux Fest Northwest.
Oh, yeah.
It's only 2 weeks away.
Jeez.
Come on up. It's in Bellingham. It's going to be awesome. Also, a complete side note, Illumination Software Creator, version 3.1 for Linux,
Golf clap,
as well as the other platforms that exist on this planet, came out this last week.
Congrats.
It's fancier than the other versions.
Ooh.
And therefore requires a whole new version number.
Of course.
That's called 3.1.
When you add more fancy, you add more numbers. That's how it works.
RadicalBreeze.com. Still $50. It's awesome.
RadicalBreeze.com.
So that's pretty cool.
Cool.
Notice.
Yeah.
I was making mention of this in the in-between spot of the show.
During the live stream stuff, yeah.
When we were interviewing a guy.
You didn't mention it this time.
Who makes a development tool. I had self-restraint.
You did. I was impressed.
I didn't mention anything I make.
Yeah. I mean,
I wanted to.
No.
I tried.
You didn't,
I seriously wanted to.
Sure.
A few times I stopped and I was like, should I?
Brian, you held yourself.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't do it because I have restraint. But now I'm going to plug my stuff. Go to radicalbreeze.com, buy my stuff.
Hey, a little bit of trivia. That last segment we did with the interview with Jeff, I had you and I placed in a terminal window.
Yeah.
It was a tabbed terminal window.
It was.
You know what was in the other tab?
No.
I was installing Gnome 3 in the background.
No, you weren't.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's
I
so
know,
cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
we're cool.
I just took a random screenshot last night. I was like, well, I'm doing Gnome 3. I'll just make a thing out of it.
Honestly, that was great. That looked really pimp.
All right. So just a couple of things to note before we go is we do have the forum over at jupitercolony.com.
Oh, yeah.
This show is live every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific.
10 a.m. Pacific?
You can join the chat room and hang out with us over at jblive.tv.
Oh, come on. The chat room is pimping.
I know, right? You can hang out with them. Of course, they're just kind of sitting there watching us.
That was my
right
streetness, by the way. Did you like that? When I
did.
said that they were pimping?
For shizzle.
Ooh. You haven't pulled that one out in a while.
Been a couple episodes.
Very
dude.
nice job.
I've also got the Facebook over at facebook.com/JupiterBroadcast. You know what you can do there? Find out about stuff.
Awesome. And again, the real studio thing, just all you got to do is compliment us. Link to jupiterbroadcasting.com, #Jupiter. Boom. You
guys are so pretty.
Boom. That's fine. If you want to talk about how
you know what you should have done?
What?
You should have only mentioned that they need the hashtag and the URL to our site once. That way we got like 90% of just straight up compliments. And then only a couple of people that really paid attention would actually put the
do
thing
it
in there.
right.
Yeah.
I should just do everything at the end. Also include the hashtag.
Yeah.
That's it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So the goal is also anyone. No. I'm not going to say that. I was trying to think of ways we could increase the usage of that hashtag to see if we could make it into the Twitter top 10 somehow.
Yeah.
But honestly, I was like, okay, anyone who like retweets it like 10 times, like different ones, but no, that'd be ridiculous.
That'd be crazy.
I don't want to get spammy here.
Yeah, you don't
get spammy.
Yeah.
And well, here's another thing.
What is it, Brian?
You get brownie points for me. This has nothing to do with the contest.
No.
If your compliment makes me giggle and is unique. That's all I'm gonna say,
dude. Yeah, look at boy, how do you say his name? Marzoom. I like that. He's got the XOM in there. He's like, in this episode of Linux Action Show, free cake from FreshBooks, Linux and Linux 20 discounts from GoDaddy, and free Real Studio. We are doing some giveaways this episode. Plus, a couple episodes ago, we had the B3 giveaway, and then the discount. This has been like the season of giveaways and discounts so far.
Dude,
awesome.
The B3 was awesome, man.
I know. I'm loving my B3 still.
Dude.
So, all right. And you know what? Thanks to FreshBooks and GoDaddy for sponsoring Linux Action Show. That is epic, right?
Totally great. Anyway, that's all we got for this episode. There's a lot of stuff coming up. I mean, this month is not at all over yet.
No.
We've got, Linux Fest is coming up. We have Ubuntu 11.04. This is the big one because this is Unity and this is all that stuff. We're going to be reviewing GNOME 3. We got new Fedora. We got so many new distro releases coming out.
Crazy.
It's insane. If you follow DistroWatch or any of the other tracking sites, you know that there's some really weird, interesting distros coming along. We're going to be covering some of the big ones, but not the big ones. We're going to take a look at some of the distros that maybe you haven't heard of, but that are doing something interesting.
I want to just slip this in here because I don't know when you're going to be hearing this. Depending on when you download it, it might be just in time for Linux Fest. If you've come in a little late and it's the days here and you're at Linux Fest and you want to get a hold of us, go over to Twitter. We'll probably be mostly meeting up with people via Twitter because that seems like the most easy way to manage it. I'm twitter.com/ChrisLAS.
And I am Brian Lunduke.
There you go.
It is my whole freaking name.
It makes sense.
Again, we have the Linux Action Room. It's an entire
I'm excited.
big room.
You can tell we're
if you're
excited.
If you're like, what were their Twitter things? Oh, no, my phone battery died. Just go to
That's
our
true.
room. It's huge. And if
That's
we're
true.
not there, people will be there.
That's a
and
good
what will
point.
they do? They'll be like, where's Brian? Where's Chris? And they will be able to find us.
Yeah, they'll know.
It's our room.
That's how it works.
It's the whole room.
Really? That's a big room.
Whole room.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. And we'll see you right back here next week.
I'm exhausted.
Work, man.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to show you guys a little tidbit. So, and I do not recommend anyone ever do this, but if you are going to rape someone, bear with me here. This is the face you want to make. That's called rape face. There you go. No. That's average rape face. I can't do the enthusiastic rape face because I'm not a raper. Chris, I don't rape. You've heard it here on the Linux Action Show first. Brian does not rape. Brian's no raper. Rapey? Rapier. Rapier? That's a sword. Rapinator. They're the person getting raped or interviewed. Right. The rapee. I'm not either is what I'm trying to say, but I assume that if you were the rapier,
IRC Ninja.
let's rock and roll.
Okay.
I would like to ask you what's new in the news this week, Chris.
All right, Brian.
On what's the shenanigans? Come on. I'm going to start the news. End of the news. I want to see
People
300.
are still waking up.
Tweet that. Facebook that. Identica.Canada that. Go log in to Perillo and Twit's IRC chat rooms and just tell everyone to come over
Oh, that's
here.
a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea.
That's actually a pretty good one.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Do that. All right, here we
All right,
go.
let's do this, ass.